I think it's very dangerous for two people in love not to think about the ways in which their relationship is culturally biased. And whether that's a woman and a man, two women, two men, whether it's a white person and a person of color, whether it's someone who grew up in privilege and someone who did not, whatever we are, there is that cultural framework out of which we come and out of which we still to some extent think and act. To be conscious of that is work. It takes work, particularly when you're in love, and particularly when you deeply love someone or think you do and want to do your best for them. I think it's in the writing of a poem that you find out what you're not saying. And it's in the writing of a poem that you find what you're still having to push up against, or what you're still having to rethink, reimagine. It's not so much a question of thinking, but of what will the imagination allow itself. I don't do research for poems. What happens is the poems will come out of reading that I do. When I wrote A Long Conversation, I had been reading, it was I forget now which year it was, 1996, 1995, the 150th anniversary of the Communist Manifesto. And it was being published again in the United States and reviewed and talked about for the first time in a long time. And I read it, and I began thinking about the many times in history when voices have spoken about these things. And I was wanting to try to weave that into a poem. But the poem has many other voices in it. It has Blake, it has Coleridge, it has Nixon, it has Che Guevara. It's drawing on a lot of thinking and writing that I was conscious of already. And I put the notes there because I want a reader to be able to go and trace those writers if she or he wants. But I never research ahead of time. I don't think I've ever done that. I think that I began writing poetry as a very young child, and as a young girl I began to take it seriously. The poetry that I knew, that I had studied, that was available to me, was not even the modernist poets. It was very traditional, very formal. And it wasn't until I went to college that I began to read what is now known as modern poetry. And that was a kind of revelation to me. And that was the sort of first point at which I began to think there are other ways of writing than the ones that you have learned to use. And poetry was always, for me, a kind of probe into the unspeakable, because it was a way of speaking indirectly about things I couldn't speak directly about.
Ahora va a subir una leyenda de la poesía norteamericana, Adrienne Rich.
Quiero agradecer a ChilePoesía por este encuentro y por su hospitalidad espléndida, su espléndida hospitalidad. Es un privilegio estar aquí.
Planetarium, poema para una mujer astrónomo. A woman in the shape of a monster in the shape of a woman. The skies are full of them. A woman in the snow among the clocks and instruments, or measuring the ground with poles, in her 98 years to discover 8 comets. She, whom the moon ruled like us, levitating into the night sky, riding the polished lenses. Galaxies of women there, doing penance for impetuousness, ribs chilled in those spaces of the mind. And I, virile, precise, and absolutely certain, from the mad webs of Uranus Borg, encountering the nova, every impulse of light exploding from the core as life flies out of us. Tycho whispering at last, "Let me not seem to have lived in vain." What we see, and seeing is changing. The light that shrivels a mountain and leaves a man alive. Heartbeat of the pulsar, heart sweating through my body, the radio impulse pouring in from Taurus. I am bombarded, yet I stand. I have been standing all my life in the direct path of a battery of signals, the most accurately transmitted, most untranslatable language in the universe. I am a galactic cloud so deep, so involuted, that a light wave could take 15 years to travel through me and has taken. I am an instrument in the shape of a woman, trying to translate pulsations into images for the relief of the body and the reconstruction of the mind.